Hello everybody, this is Jim Bowe, your instructor, and in this video we are going to be setting up our very first VMs for our CISC244 course, and specifically we'll be setting up Microsoft Server 2016 standard. Before we actually get into setting that up, I just wanted to go over a couple of things. I am using a laptop with an i7 processor and 16 gigs worth of memory. I also have attached a external hard drive, a USB 3 2 terabyte drive, and I've put a couple of things on there. The first thing that I've placed on there is all of my downloaded software, and specifically what we need is, drill down to Microsoft, we're going to be loading up the Windows Server 2016 standard. You'll notice in the folder that I have the ISO file and that I have a text file containing the product key. I've also created a couple of other folders on this drive, specifically VirtualBox VMs. This is where I plan to put all of my virtual machines. And then a VM share. This is a folder that I will use to move files back and forth between my local laptop and my virtual server or virtual workstations. Okay, so you might consider setting that up. One of the things to keep in mind is that I'm using an external drive to keep everything on, keep things organized and so on. But depending upon your system and so on, an external drive may be too slow. If you've got something like an external drive with a USB 2 interface, you may find it to be too slow. And it also depends on what your system is capable of supporting. So you may decide to keep everything on your local hard drive for your desktop computer or laptop computer. Alright, so we've got that out there, that's ready to go, and now I've got my VirtualBox up and running, and the very first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create our first VM. So let's get started. We're going to begin by clicking on the New button here. And the first thing that it's going to ask us is, what is the name of this server? And this is the VirtualBox name. There will actually be another place for the Microsoft server name, and we will change that to this name as well. And the name is simply temp, because it's a template server, and I'm going to put STD for standard. As you can see, I've already changed my VirtualBox preferences so that all of the machine folders will go to drive G, which is my external drive, and into the folder VirtualBox VMs. If you're interested in doing that, I'll show you where to change that in a moment. But let's just get through these couple of screens. I'm going to set my memory here to about 6 gigs. That's fine, right there. And we're also going to pick Create a Virtual Hard Disk Now. And then we will select Create. And it's going to ask where it's going to place this virtual hard drive, and the default in this case is fine. We're going to go with a 32 gig virtual drive, and we're going to use a VDI, which probably runs best for VirtualBox, but it does not integrate with any of the other VM softwares out there. We'll also select dynamically allocate the storage so that the drive does not actually gobble up 32 gigs of your local hard drive. That drive will grow as we go, okay? The ending file that we're going to have is going to be approximately 10 gigs in size, so it's going to be pretty substantial all by itself, and it will grow a little bit, but not by much. So we'll go and say create, and there we go. Okay, so it's been created. We still have some configuration to do. Just real quick, I talked about those preferences about changing where the default drive machine folder is and so on. So I set that up right here. Okay, under preferences, file, then preferences. Alright. Having done the initial configuration on our virtual server, temp server standard, we now need to go in and make a couple of other configuration settings on the VirtualBox VM. So we're going to point to our server here, and we're going to give it a right click, and we can go to settings, or you can simply go to settings up here on this icon. And we have a number of different tabs here, and we'll be going through a couple of these. First, in the general, what we want to do is we want to select the operating system that we're going to be installing. So you'll see it's got Windows 7 64-bit, and that's not what we want to install. So we'll click on the down arrow, and we'll go to Windows 2016 64-bit. Next, let's go to our storage, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to add in a CD-ROM drive. I'm going to take this one and I'm going to simply remove it. Then we're going to add a drive. No, I don't want to add a controller. We'll point to the controller itself. Then we'll click on adding an optical drive, and we'll choose that drive or disk right now. And let's go and search. Well, I've got it already attached, but I'm going to search for it again. Let's see if we can. And let me just go back and show that to you. So we're going to click on add, and it will allow you to browse out, and you're going to look for where your ISO file is, and that's on my external drive under the folder Windows Server 2016 Standard 64-bit. Here is my ISO file. Okay, we'll click on that and we'll say open. Now, I had already had that. It was already attached to my my VirtualBox environment. So that's why you see it right here, right now. So I'm going to select that, and then I'm going to say choose. So now what you're seeing is you're seeing a CD-ROM, but it could even be a DVD drive, if you will, but it's an optical drive. And it has loaded in it my Windows Server 2016. So that finishes our storage devices. Next, we're going to go to Network, and we are going to select Bridged Adapter. And here, what we need to do is we need to select the network interface that this machine is going to use. Now, these are the adapters that are available on your local machine, and our virtual machine is going to be sharing these network interfaces, and we need to decide which one we want to use. So I'm going to select my wireless adapter because I'm not plugged in to a hardwired Ethernet, so I'm not going to select the Realtek. So we'll go with this. Continuing on, we're going to go to shared folders, and I'm going to add a shared folder, and we will browse for that share folder. Go down to my external drive, and I'm going to select VM share here, select folder, and we want to do an auto mount, so to bring that online once we bring the machine online. And then we'll say OK, and then we are done with our VirtualBox settings. We'll say OK, and there we go. So our next step will be to literally boot up our virtual server and load the Windows Server 2016 Standard Edition onto our virtual server. Before we start loading our Windows Server, just a couple of things to note on the interface here, and that is that we've got in our optical drive, we have our operating system image, or ISO, installed or ready to go. Now what we're going to do is we're going to boot up our virtual machine, and we are going to begin the installation process for Windows Server. To do that, we're going to click on Start. Well, first you highlight your temporary server. We click on Start, and this will take a moment to get started. And what it's going to do is it's going to reach out and it's going to go looking for the DVD to get it started. So VirtualBox 6, alright, and it's loading up files. This will take a moment. When you're watching this, one of the beautiful things about having a video is you can always fast forward through some of this stuff, so you don't have to wait. But I'm going to record all of it so that you also get an idea as just how long it may take for certain steps. Truck going by outside. Okay, so we're getting started here. Okay, so our first screen is up. As you can see, it's Windows Server 2016. We're going to select our language is English for United States. Time and currency will be English, and our keyboard will be US. We'll select Next, and then we'll select Install Now. Okay, at this point you plug in your product key. I'm probably going to cut this piece out, as you should use your product key, not mine. So I'm going to stop the video, put my product key in, and then I'll pick it up after I get to the next point. Okay, we've entered our product key in. Next, we have to determine which version of standard do we want. We have the server core, which does not provide a GUI interface, and we'll look at that later. Or we install a standard server with the standard GUI interface that you're all used to seeing for your desktop. So I'm going to select the desktop experience here, and we'll say next. I thought I had selected next. All right, and we'll accept the terms. Say next. And at this point, what we want to do is we want to select the custom Windows install. We're not doing any kind of updates or anything like that. This is a fresh install. Now, next we get to determine where we're going to install Windows on. And at this point, your system is going to show you available disk space. Now this VM only has a single disk or a single drive with a 32 gig partition. In a real server, you may see multiple drives or multiple partitions that you'll want to select from. The other possible thing that you might see is you may not see anything at all, especially if you're loading up on a physical machine with a special drive controller. So if you have a let's say a Dell with a special hard drive controller, you may need to load the necessary driver software, and the way you do that is you go down to this load driver and you find the driver software that you need and you load that up. But one of the beautiful things about working with virtual machines is that we're using a virtual controller. We already have the software for it, so no need to add any additional drivers at this point. So I'm going to select this partition, and then we will say next. And at this point, the system's going to go through and start copying files and going through the installation. I'm going to stop the video and then restart it after it completes this process. Okay, after installing the operating system, the next thing that will occur is the system will automatically reboot. And once it comes back, it will come up with this screen here, which is asking you to set your password for the administrator. For class, we will be using a standard password here, and it will be password with a capital P, everything else is lowercase, 2019. So let me put that in. And you can see it right there. So a capital P, then lowercase letters, and then 2019. That is what our standard password will be for all systems that we configure. So let me repeat that down below. Just check that. That looks good. We'll say finish. Okay, and the system wants to at this point do us to log in, and before we do that I want to show you something. Let me do this view, and we're going to go into scaled mode so I can just change the scaling on this thing. That's better. So I can scale this based on what I need. And then alright, so that's fitting a little better. Alright, one of the things I want to show you is that there is what's called a host key when working with VirtualBox. And we use that for doing such things as Control-Alt-Delete. If you go up to Input here and go to Keyboard, you can insert a Control-Alt-Delete, or you can use Host and Delete. And the host key, the system is telling you what the host key is. It's right control. So on your keyboard, it's the right control button. So I'm going to hold that down, and then I'm going to press my delete key. Let's try that again. Here we go. It's going to ask me for my password. Password 2019. And it's going to set up my profile here. Any minute. Yeah, that would be great. And here we go, starting up our server manager. And we're going to change a couple of things once we get into that. Okay. And you can say yes, make it discoverable, because you will ultimately want your laptop to be able to see this machine. So we'll say yes to that. Next, we want to do a little configuration on our server itself. And over here on the left, we're going to go to local server. And here is the name that Windows has assigned to this particular server. And we're going to want to change that to reflect our temp server STD. Okay? So we'll click on that. And we'll go down to change. And we'll change this to temp server std, and we'll say OK. The system's going to want to restart after we change its name, but we can go through and finish a couple of other things before we actually do the restart. So we'll say at this point we'll go to close, and we'll do a restart later. And a couple of things that we want to set up. First, we want to turn on remote desktop, and we're going to go over to where it says disabled. We're going to click on that, and we want to allow remote desktop connections, and we'll say OK. And the administrator is already allowed to do a remote, so we'll just leave that there and say OK. And that should turn into enabled. It may need a restart, I think, to make that happen. Okay. Next thing we want to do is we want to turn off our Windows Defender, the firewall, and we're going to basically turn that off. And then we can, let's see here, what else do we have? Yeah. And then we'll say close this out. And scroll down over here. The other thing that I want to make sure of is that our Windows firewall is shut off. So we'll come down here to, you'll notice that I gave a right click to the network icon. Now I'm going to go over to Windows Firewall. And you can see that currently the firewall is on. And we're going to go turn Windows Firewall on or off. And we'll click that so it gets turned off. Click here, and then we'll say OK. And the firewall is now off. Now the reason that I do this is just to make it easy for us to connect other machines. We'll talk in greater detail about the Windows Firewall and what should be turned off, how to put holes in the firewall for applications, or not holes but exceptions for the various applications we might want to load up. But for right now, just to keep things easy for us, we've turned the firewall off. So we will close that, and let's see, then we have Internet Explorer Enhanced Security Configuration, and we want to turn this off. And we'll turn it off for administrators only, and we'll say OK. What this does is it allows Internet Explorer to go out and access other websites. Otherwise, if we had left that on, every time we went out to a website, the system would have come back and asked us if it was okay to add an exception. It's really very annoying when you're first getting started. So for the time being, we are going to just turn that off. I would next like to install Firefox. I prefer Firefox. You can do Chrome if you want. So we'll open this up, and you can see that it's already complaining. So we're going to say don't use the recommended, and don't show this message again. And then we're going to go to Firefox, and it uses Bing. And we'll go and click on this. We'll do a download, and we're going to go through and we're going to install Firefox. So we'll say run it. Okay, almost there. Okay, so Firefox is up and running. Now what we need to do next is restart it and make it our default. So we're going to close it. We're going to close Internet Explorer. We'll open up Firefox. We'll say use this as my default browser. Come down here, check our default browser, select Firefox again. Close this out. And I'm going to close this down as well. So we're just about there, gang. We just have a couple more things to do. The last thing that we want to do is we want to set up our shared folder that we can pass files back and forth between our server and our host machine, in my case my laptop. So we're going to go up here to the top here, and we're going to go to devices, and then we're going to say insert the guest edition CD. What the CD does is it gives us access to additional functionality or features within VirtualBox. So we've now inserted that CD. Now we have to open up our Windows Explorer, and we're going to go to this PC, and you'll see this virtual PC CD down here which says VirtualBox Guest Edition. So we'll click on that. And we're going to go to this file right here, third from the bottom. Okay. And now we're going to install this. Just take the defaults. And we'll say install. Okay, that's normal for the screen to flicker. And then we'll say I'll manually reboot later, and we'll say finish. Okay, so now let's go through a reboot process, and we'll do the last piece, which is setting up the share folder. So we'll go to start, then we'll hit restart, and the system's going to ask for a reason. One of the things about Microsoft Server is anytime that you do a restart, it wants to know the reason for it. Typically you can say other and planned, but especially if you're working with others, it's always good to document why you restarted the server. You don't have to do it every time, but it's good to, let's say you're installing a new piece of software, to at least mention it once that you're currently working on installing this piece of software, and it may take a couple of restarts to get it going. So let's say continue. We'll go through the restart. Okay. Here we go. That's something else. Okay, so we'll hit our right control key and the delete. And this is in effect an alt control delete. Enter in our password. Okay, there's our server and the server manager. Here it comes. We'll get started. While that's running, we can go up here and we can go to shared folders, shared folder settings. We can select our shared folder, say OK. And now if we open up Windows Explorer again, we now have this VM share, which is also on our local machine, and that is right here. So this folder is being shared with our server. Okay, gang, the last thing that I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go into Server Manager, and then I'd like to go to Local Server, and I want you to take a snapshot of this screen here on the properties for your temp server standard. And I'm just going to use the snipping tool. We'll say new. We'll go in, we'll take this whole screen, and then I'm going to paste this into a Microsoft Word. And there that is. At the top of the document, just put in your name, and then let's save the document. And we're going to call it CISC244H01F19. Last name, first initial, LAB01, and mark this as A because B is going to be the core server, okay? And we'll say screenshot, and then we'll save it. And you're going to, in the end, you're going to turn this in to me. After we get that saved, simply shut down your server. We'll just minimize this for the moment. Close this out. Say no. Then we're going to go and we're going to shut our server down. Say shut down. And we'll say unplanned, continue. And this will bring us back. So at this point what we can do is just shut your VirtualBox down and hand in this Word document if you would. For those of you who are storing your VM images on your local hard drive, you might at this time want to save your VM to an external hard drive so that you can bring it back and forth to school. And the easiest way to do that is to go up to your new server there, give it a right click, go to export, and you'll receive this screen. Identify where you're going to save it, so identify the external hard drive that you want to save this to, and possibly a folder and so on, and then say next. Now mine is being saved to my local hard drive because the actual image for this virtual machine is on an external drive, so this thing's trying to back it up to another hard drive. So, but you're going to be going the other way, from your local hard drive onto an external drive. And we'll simply say next. And as far as documentation, the name is just fine. Everything else we'll leave it alone. We'll say export. This is going to take a little time to do. So give yourself a couple of minutes. As you can see, this thing's estimating about 4 minutes to back this up. I forget, last time I looked, this was about a 10 gig file. So just be aware. Okay, we're up to 10 minutes now, so it's going to take a little time. But once you've got it backed up, you've got a single file out there with an extension OVA. You can then use that to restore it into let's say a machine in our classroom or on campus somewhere. Okay, so that would be my last recommendation. So at this point we are all done with our lab for this segment. The next piece I want you to do is I want you to install a core server, which is slightly different than what we just went through for a full GUI standard server. Okay, super. Talk with you soon.